The delivery was already 90 minutes late, and I was standing at the site gate with my phone against my ear, listening to a dispatcher tell me a lie I'd heard 100 times. "Truck's on its way, Mr. Caldwell. Driver hit some traffic." Traffic where? Downtown. It's backed up all over. I looked past the chain link at the street, at Halstead Avenue running north toward the center of the city. And there was traffic, sure, but it was the wrong kind. Not the crawl of a normal Tuesday. Cars were stopped in the northbound lanes, but the southbound side was moving too fast. People leaning on their horns, a delivery van cutting across the double yellow to get around whatever was ahead. I'd worked this corner for 14 months. I knew what the street did at 9:40 in the morning. This wasn't it. "Tell him to take 5th if he can't get through," I said, and hung up before the dispatcher could explain to me why that was impossible. We were tying steel for the 12th floor deck that week, which meant I needed rebar. And the rebar was on a flatbed somewhere in a city that was starting to move like it had been kicked. Behind me, up the face of the tower, the forms were set, and my concrete crew was waiting on steel that wasn't coming. Every hour I lost cost me money I'd have to explain in a meeting on Friday. That's what I was thinking about. The Friday meeting. That's the honest truth of it. A man can be standing at the edge of the end of the world and still be worried about a schedule. Raphael came down from the podium level with his hard hat pushed back, and a look on his face I didn't like. "Eric, you seeing this? The traffic?" "Yeah." "No." He pointed east, over the low buildings toward the hospital district. "Listen." I listened. Sirens. That's a city sound. You stop hearing it after a while. But these weren't fading and coming back the way sirens do when they're headed somewhere and then gone. They were stacking, layering on top of each other. And they were all going the same direction toward the hospital. And then, a minute later, some of them coming back. "Probably a wreck on the interstate," I said. "That's a lot of wreck." It was. I didn't say so. I've been running commercial jobs for 26 years. Concrete, mostly, high-rise residential the last decade. You learn to read a site the way you read weather, not one sign but a bunch of small ones lining up. The late truck, the wrong-way traffic, the stacked sirens. A guy on the sidewalk across the street, standing in the middle of the pavement, not walking, just looking north with his hand over his mouth. None of it meant anything by itself. All of it together made the hair on my arms stand up in a way I'd learned not to ignore. Because on a job, the times I ignored it were the times somebody got hurt. My phone buzzed. Text from my brother-in-law, my former brother-in-law, I should say. Julie's brother, Tom. And I hadn't heard from him in probably a year. "You anywhere near downtown?" it said. "Stay out of it. Something's going on at Mercy." Mercy was the big hospital, 6 blocks north. I texted back, "What's going on?" and watched the little dots appear and disappear twice, and then nothing. That was the last regular text message I got from anybody. 2 of my subs came down the exterior hoist together, the framing guys, and one of them was already on the phone talking loud in Spanish, and the other one looked at me and said, "You hear about the thing at the hospital?" "What thing?" "My cousin's a nurse there. She says people are attacking people, like biting." He said it the way you'd repeat something you didn't believe. Then he looked at his own hands. "She said don't come get her. She said don't come." I want to be clear about something. I did not stand there and understand what was happening. Nobody did. What I understood was that the site was starting to come apart. In my hands, guys were on their phones. Guys were talking instead of working. A mixer truck had shown up, and its driver was refusing to back into the pour because he wanted to leave. And my whole professional life had trained me to respond to a site coming apart by taking control of it. So I did the thing I knew how to do. I shut it down. "Everybody off the deck," I called up. I found the crew chiefs. I told them the truth as I understood it, which was that something bad was happening a few blocks north, and I wanted people home with their families before the roads got worse, not after. Nobody argued. That's how you knew it was real. Nobody argued with me about going home early. On a normal day, I'd have gotten grief. We moved fast. I had maybe 40 people on the site that morning across all the trades, and inside of 20 minutes, most of them were gone. Out the main gate on Halstead, headed for the parking structure 2 blocks south, or for the bus, or for whatever. I kept the hoist running for the deck crews to get down, and Manny was running it. Manny ran the hoist most days, a heavyset guy in his 50s who'd operated lifts and cranes on jobs all over the state and who did not get flustered. And I told him, "Last trip, get everybody down, then park it and go home." "You leaving?" he asked me. "After I lock up. Go on." He went down. I did not see him leave the site, and I want you to remember that, because I assumed he did, and assuming things is the whole story of what happened to us. By the time I got the gate on Halstead chained, the street had changed again. The northbound lanes were fully stopped now, abandoned. 3 cars just left with their doors open. People were walking south on the sidewalk fast, not running yet. But that walk people do when they want to run and are embarrassed to. A city bus was stopped at the light with its doors open and nobody getting on or off. And then I saw Julie. I want to tell you, I felt something profound. What I actually felt was confusion, because for a second my brain refused to place her a woman in a gray blazer, half a block up, coming south with the crowd, one shoe in her hand, moving wrong, favoring a leg. Then she turned her head, and it was Julie, my ex-wife, 4 years divorced. And she was maybe 200 feet from a construction gate I had just locked. And something up the street behind her was making people scream in a way I had never heard grown adults scream. Her branch, she manages a credit union, has for years, was up on Halstead and 9th. 4 blocks north, toward the hospital, toward all of it. I didn't decide to open the gate. My hands did it. I got the chain off and dragged it back and yelled her name. And she saw me and her face did a whole complicated thing in half a second. And then she just ran the last stretch and came through the gap. And I hauled the gate shut behind her and got the chain around it. She was breathing hard. There was a scrape on her cheek and her stockings were torn. "Eric," she said, like she was confirming it to herself. "You hurt?" I fell. There was a car up on the sidewalk. She was staring back through the chain link at the street. "Eric, there's people out there. I saw a man. He was..." "Okay. They're biting people. I watched a man." "Okay, you're inside now." That's what I said. "You're inside now." Like the fence meant something. Like I'd done my job by getting her behind chain link. That was the first version of the mistake I'd keep making all day. I understood the fence, so I trusted the fence. Out on Halstead, past our gate, the walking fast turned into running. Something had come around the corner 4 blocks up, and the whole crowd broke at once, the way a school of fish turns. And then I saw one of them. I'd heard the framing guy say biting, and I'd filed it under panic, exaggeration, the kind of thing a scared person's cousin says. What came around a stopped car in the middle of the street was a man in a UPS brown shirt. And he moved like a man, mostly, except that he ran into the side of the car instead of around it. Hit it hip first, kept going. And when he got hold of a woman who tripped, he didn't rob her or hit her or do any human thing. He put his mouth on her arm. She was screaming and hitting him, and it did not slow him down at all. His face didn't change. That was the part I couldn't get past, a person doing a thing that violent with no expression at all, like a machine that had been pointed. Julie made a sound next to me. "Don't," I said, and pulled her back from the fence, further into the sight, into the shadow of the podium. One of my guys was still there. Not gone after all. Raphael. He'd been at the material lift on the south side, and he came around the corner of the podium at a jog. "Eric, the south gate," Raphael said. "It's open. The one by the dumpsters." That gate faced the alley. It was chained during off hours, but during the day, we left it open for the debris hauls. If it was open, the site wasn't closed. And out in the street, where the UPS man had the woman down, 3 more of them had come around the corner, and the running crowd was funneling. I could see it. The crowd was funneling into the alley to get away from Halstead. And the alley led to my open south gate. "Get it shut," I said. "Now, Raphael with me. Julie, I'm coming. Julie, stay. I'm not standing here alone." She'd already dropped the one shoe and pulled off the other, barefoot on the site gravel. "Tell me what to do." There wasn't time to fight her on it, and honestly, alone in the shadow of a building was not safer than with 2 men, so I didn't try. The south gate is a rolling chain link panel on a track, and it had jammed halfway, the way it did about once a week, because the track was full of grit and nobody had greased it since the job started. There were people in the alley now, real people, running people, 6 or 8 of them. And behind them, at the mouth of the alley, one of the infected, coming on in that graceless straight line. Here's a thing I learned in the next 4 minutes that would matter all day. They come to sound. Raphael grabbed the gate and hauled, and it screeched on the grit like a saw. And the infected man at the mouth of the alley turned toward the screech and came faster. And the running people were trying to get in through the same gap we were trying to close. "Let them in. Let them in. Then close it," Julie said. And she was right. You couldn't close it with people in the gap anyway. And she stepped up to the gap and did something I would not have thought of. She didn't yell. She put her hands out low and made a beckoning motion and said, in a completely level voice, loud enough to carry but not a scream, "This way. Come to me. This way. That's it. Keep coming. You're all right." And the running people, who a second ago had been a panicking clot, funneled through the gap toward the calm voice instead of piling into each other. 6 of them came through. Then Raphael and I got our shoulders on the gate together, one of us hauling the leading edge and the other driving from behind. And it screamed the last 3 feet along the track. And I got the chain through the post, and Raphael dropped the pin. And the infected man hit the fence from the other side hard enough to bow it, and stood there with his fingers hooked through the chain link, not shaking it, not trying to climb, just standing with his face pressed to the metal and his mouth working, a foot from mine. I'd never been that close to one. His eyes tracked movement, but not, I don't think, us specifically. When Raphael stepped sideways, his head followed Raphael. When a chunk of the running crowd's noise came from the far end of the alley, his head snapped that way instead. Sound and movement. That's what he was. "Don't make noise," I said to everybody. And I stepped back slow. So now I had 9 people on a construction site I'd told everyone to leave. 6 strangers from the alley, ranging from a heavy-set man in a suit to a teenage girl with earbuds still around her neck. Raphael, Julie, me, and though I didn't know it yet, 3 more somewhere below. We took a fast count of ourselves in the podium shade, while the thing at the fence lost interest and wandered off toward the sound of the street. "Nobody bitten," everybody said. I made each of them say it, made them show me arms, because I'd already understood, watching the UPS man, that a bite was the thing to be afraid of. The suit man's name was Gordon. He kept trying to make calls that wouldn't connect. The teenage girl was Aisha. There was a young couple, a man with a tool belt still on, who turned out to be an electrician named Chris, who'd been working a job up the block, and an older woman named Dolores, who prayed under her breath the whole time. The street on the far side of the podium had gone from bad to something I don't have a good word for. It wasn't a battle. It was worse than a battle because there was no fight in it. It was a thing being done to a crowd. And the crowd's noise pulled more of them, and the more of them, the more noise. And I understood, standing there, that the ground floor of my site with its open podium, its 2 street-facing gates, its material lift openings, its unfinished walls was a colander, and staying at street level was going to get us killed. "We can't stay down here," I said. Julie looked at me. "And go where?" I looked up, 19 floors of gray concrete going up into an ordinary blue sky. "Up," I said. She didn't like it. I could see she didn't like it. Julie has never in her life liked a plan she didn't get to help make, and I'll be honest, I'd never once in 22 years of marriage given her enough time to. But she also didn't have a better idea, and the street was doing what the street was doing, so she said, "For how long?" And I said, "Long enough for that to burn out," and pointed at the street, and I believed it. I genuinely believed it would burn out. The stair core is the safe way up in a fire. It's a concrete box inside a concrete box, the strongest part of the building. But it's a long climb with 9 scared people, and the temporary lighting only worked on some floors, and I didn't want us strung out over 11 flights. So I made a call I'd second-guess later. We took the hoist. The exterior construction hoist is a steel cage on the outside of the building that runs up a mast on a rack and pinion drive, a temporary elevator, basically, that we use to move men and materials during construction. It's loud. It's slow. It's exposed on the outside of the building. But it holds a dozen people, and it climbs 11 floors in a couple minutes instead of 20. And with the street the way it was, I wanted people off the ground, now, not in 20 minutes. I got it going myself. I'm not the operator, Manny is, but I've run it enough to move it. And I loaded everybody in and took us up. I remember the street dropping away below us through the cage mesh, the whole intersection visible now, cars in running shapes and the ones that didn't run, and Dolores praying, and Julie standing very still with her hand flat against the cage wall and her eyes closed. The motor whined. The mast clanked at every splice. On the outside of a building, in an open steel cage, 11 floors up, you feel every bit of what's holding you. I took us to 11. I want to explain why 11, because it mattered. Not the roof. The roof was exposed to weather and had only the one way down. And a place with one way out is a trap. Not the lower floors too close to the street, too many ways in. 11 was the highest floor with a fully poured, cured slab and completed core walls. 12 up was still forms and unfinished edges, the deck we'd been tying steel for. 11 had temporary lighting on a circuit I knew worked. 11 had a run of the temporary water riser with a hose bib. And on 11, we'd framed out a few interior rooms already. A couple of what would become apartments had stud walls and even some drywall, which meant real rooms with real doorways, not just open slab. It was, out of a building with no good options, the least bad floor. I knew that because I knew the building. That knowledge was the best thing I had. It was also, though I couldn't see it yet, the thing that was going to fool me. We came off the hoist onto 11, and I walked them back from the edge. The perimeter was only cabled off, not walled. A horizontal cable at knee and waist height, and a 40-foot drop to the podium roof past that, and got them into the framed rooms in the core, away from the open edge, where the concrete was on 3 sides. Then I did the inventory. Fast. Because 9 scared people need to be told what they have, or they invent what they don't. Water. There was the temporary riser, which fed a hose bib on this floor, but that was construction water, non-potable, fine for washing and flushing, not for drinking, and I said so. For drinking, we had what was in the site office fridge and the vending, which Raphael and I had carried up in a gang box. 2 flats of bottled water, maybe 40 bottles, and whatever was in people's lunch coolers. For 9 people, that was a day, maybe more, if we were careful. Not much more. Food, worse. The vending machine's worth of chips and candy, a box of granola bars from the safety meeting supplies, 3 or 4 guys' lunches left behind in the brake trailer that Raphael had grabbed. My own lunch. Enough that nobody starved today. Not enough for tomorrow. Power. Temporary, live. Running the work lights and the hoist off the utility feed with the site's temporary panels. Which meant it depended on the city grid. And the city was coming apart, so I did not trust it. Sanitation. And I made myself think about this, even though nobody wants to, because a floor full of people with nowhere to go becomes a health problem. Fast, we had the temporary construction toilet situation, which up here meant we'd have to rig something, buckets and the hose bib for the framed-in room that had a floor drain roughed in. Not pleasant, but I'd rather plan it than have it happen. Tools, materials. This was the one place we were rich. It's a construction site. We had a first aid cabinet in the break area on 10 that I knew was stocked because I'd signed for it. We had pry bars, hammers, screw guns with charged batteries, plywood, 2x material, screws, rope, tarps, a couple of fire extinguishers per floor by code, and site radios in the gang box, the little handhelds we used to talk floor to floor, 4 of them, charged. I laid it all out plain, and I watched people settle a little as I did, because a count, even a bad count, is better than not knowing. Julie stood at the edge of the framed room with her arms crossed, watching me run it. And when I finished, she said quietly, just to me, "You're happy up here." Happy's not the word. You know what I mean. You've got a building. You know the building. She wasn't being cruel. It was almost a peace offering. I don't know if high is safe, Eric. High is just far from the door. Those things aren't going to climb. But everything we need is down there, isn't it? The water, the way out. For now, the way out is a street full of them. For now, she agreed. And she let it go. But she'd said it. And I heard it. And I filed it under Julie being difficult when I should have filed it under Julie being right. Because she was right. That was the whole thing. And I'd need 8 more hours to admit it. Height put distance between us and the infected. It did not put us any closer to water or food or safety or out. I had confused a strong position with a safe one. A concrete box is a wonderful place to be dead of thirst. I didn't have long to sit with it because that's when the hoist started moving. We all heard it at once. It's a specific sound, the drive motor cutting in. A heavy electrical thunk, and then the grind of the pinion climbing the mast rack. And then the whole mast talking as the cage comes up. Clank at every splice. I'd parked the cage at 11 when we got off. I was looking right at it, out past the cabled edge, sitting empty at our level where I'd left it. Except it wasn't. It had gone down. I'd been so deep in the inventory I hadn't watched it, and somebody had called it down. And now the motor had engaged, and the mast was talking, and the cage was coming back up from below with a person-shaped shadow inside it. Everybody went still. Dolores stopped praying. Julie moved without thinking to put herself between the room full of people and the edge. And I realized later that was pure branch manager reflex. Put your body between the customers and the trouble. And I got out in front of her because I did not know who or what was in that cage. "Get them back in the room," I said to Julie, low. "Raphael, with me. Everybody else back." The thing about the hoist coming up is you have plenty of time to be afraid of it. It's slow. You stand at the edge and watch it climb towards you one floor at a time. And you can see the shape inside get more defined. And there is nothing to do but wait for it. An infected can't run a hoist. I told myself that. I said it to Raphael. They don't operate machines. But someone was operating it, and I had told everyone to leave, and I had believed the site was empty. And here was the site telling me I was wrong in the most direct way a building can. The cage came level with 11 and stopped. Dead even with the slab, which an amateur can't do. You feather that landing or you slam it. And I knew before the gate even opened that whoever was in there could run a hoist. Manny opened the cage gate. Manny, who I'd sent down at least an hour ago, who I'd assumed had walked out the gate and driven home, was standing in the cage with his hard hat gone and a gash over one eyebrow, crusted brown, and his shirt soaked through with sweat. And he wasn't alone. There was a second man, half sitting, half lying against the back rail of the cage. A young guy, one pant leg cut open, and a t-shirt tied around his thigh, dark with blood. His face, the gray-white of somebody who's lost more than he should have. "Eric," Manny said, and his voice cracked on it. "Thank God. I saw the lights on 11. I hoped it was you." I did not welcome him aboard. I want to be honest about that, because it's the thing Julie and I would go around about for the next hour. My first move was not relief. My first move was to put my hand up flat, keep him in the cage, and say, "Both of you show me your arms." Slow. Manny understood. He'd seen enough down below to understand. He turned his forearms over, showed me clean skin, turned his head so I could see the gash was above the eye, and old, not a bite. "It's not a bite," he said. I hit my head on the strong back going down. "Danny." He nodded at the young guy. "Danny's leg is rebar, not a bite. He caught it on a dowel bar climbing over the deck. It's bleeding bad, but it's not a bite." Julie had come up beside me despite what I'd said, and she was already reading them. I could see her doing it. That thing she does. The same thing that had funneled the alley crowd through a jammed gate. She looked at Manny's hands, which were shaking, and at Danny's color. And she said, "He needs that leg wrapped tighter, and he needs to lie down. And he needs it now, or the arms won't matter." And then to Manny, gentle, the way you'd talk to a spooked animal. "You did good getting him up here. You can come out now. Slow, like Eric said. Nobody's going anywhere." Manny came out. Raphael and I got Danny out between us, and he yelled when we moved him. And I saw Julie flinch at the sound, because sound was the enemy now. And we all knew it. But you can't move a man with a torn open leg without him making noise. We carried him back into the framed room, and Julie got the balled-up t-shirt off his thigh and got a look at the wound. And it was ugly, but it wasn't spurting. The cloth had been pressed hard against it and had slowed it. And she kept pressure on with a fresh pad while she got a real pressure dressing built up out of the first aid stuff. Gauze and a wrap, snug over the wound. Direct pressure, the way you're taught. I did the workplace first aid, that's all. She told me flat when I looked at her. I'm not a nurse. Somebody who actually knows better needs to look at this. Chris, the electrician, it turned out, had job site first aid and CPR training and a career's worth of experience with cuts and falls and men getting hurt on jobs, which was the first useful thing to come out of the alley crowd. And between them, they kept firm pressure on the wrap, checked that it wasn't soaking through, and got Danny lying still with the leg up. Chris didn't pretend to know more than that he said the bleeding looked controlled for now, and Danny needed to stay off it. And that was as far as he'd go. Between the two of them, they got Danny stable enough to stop being an emergency and start being a problem. That's when Manny told us the part that mattered. He'd gotten the last deck crew down, like I'd told him, and then he'd gone back for his jacket in the brake trailer. And by the time he came out the south gate, the alley was already going wrong. He and Danny was a rebar tier, a young iron worker who'd been up on the deck. And a third man had gotten cut off from Halstead, gone back into the site to get away from the street, and tried to go up the interior stairs where they'd be safe. "How many of you?" I said. "3, Manny said. "Me, Danny, and Owen." "Where's Owen?" And Manny looked at the floor, and then back up at me, and said the thing that was going to eat the next hour of our lives. "He's still down there. We got separated on the way up the stair. Danny went down on the rebar on the 7 landing. And I got him. I couldn't get both of them. Eric, Danny couldn't walk. And Owen went back down to try to block the stair door on 5 because those things were coming up behind us. And then he stopped. Then the stair got bad, and I got Danny to the hoist on the mechanical level and brought him up. And I couldn't go back down. For Owen, not carrying Danny, not with the stair like it was. He's down there. He was on 5, or he was trying to get to the mechanical room off the hoist landing on the podium level. I don't know. We lost the radio between us. But he was alive 20 minutes ago. I could hear him on the hoist landing, banging, before I brought the cage up. The room got very quiet. I want to tell you what was in my head, honestly, because it wasn't heroic and it wasn't cold. It was both at once, and they were fighting. The heroic part. I had told everyone to leave. I had chained the gate and told a whole crew to go home, and I had believed the site was empty because I had personally cleared it. Except I hadn't. I'd cleared the parts I could see and assumed the rest. The same way I'd assumed Manny left. The same way I'd assumed the fence meant something. Owen was down there because the site wasn't cleared. And it wasn't cleared because I'd trusted my own picture of it over the actual building. That's a hard thing to sit with, and I didn't want to sit with it. I wanted to fix it. The cold part. Running the hoist back down meant energizing the whole system again, which meant noise at that motor, that mast, talking all the way down the outside of the building. And noise brought them. And I just watched what noise did to a crowd. It meant sending the cage down into a lower site I now knew was full of infected. It meant that if the power dropped while the cage was low, we'd lose it down there and lose our fast way off 11. It meant turning our one defensible position into an open route, a lit-up, noise-making thing, pointing straight down into the danger. Every one of those was a real reason. None of them was cowardice. I need you to understand they were real, because I used them, and I half meant them. Julie was watching my face, and she knew me too well not to read both halves of it. "You didn't clear that floor," she said. Wasn't an accusation. It was almost the opposite. She was handing me the thing I needed. "You told everyone to leave, and you locked the gate. But you didn't walk floor 5 yourself. You didn't see him leave the way you saw the others leave. So you don't actually know." "I don't know," I said. "Then he's a maybe, not a no." She said it flat. And then, because she is fair, and because she wasn't going to pretend the danger wasn't real just to win the point. And running that thing back down is going to be loud, and it might strand us, and it might bring them up. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm saying you don't get to call him gone because it's inconvenient that he's not. Manny said, I'll take the cage down. It's my machine. I know its limits better than anybody. I'll go. Not alone, I said, because if the point was that I'd left a man in the building by assuming, then the fix was not to assume Manny could handle it alone. I know the lower floors. I know where the mechanical room door is off that landing. I know it swings the wrong way and jams. You run the machine, I'll do the door and the getting him in. Julie said, then I'm going to the edge to spot. If Owen's on the podium landing, I can see the hoist mast from 11 and tell you on the radio whether the cage is clear before you open the gate down there. And somebody up here who isn't panicking needs to keep these people quiet while a hoist runs. Because the second that motor starts, everybody on this floor is going to want to talk about it. Which was exactly correct. And exactly the thing I would not have thought of. And I gave her the radio. Here's the plan we made, and I'll give it to you the way we said it. Because it stayed a good plan right up until the part where it stopped being one. Manny and I would take the cage down, not to the street, but to the podium level, the hoist's lower landing. One level up from the street gates, where there was an enclosed mechanical room Owen might have gotten to. We'd run it slow to keep noise down as much as a hoist can be kept quiet, which is not much. Julie on 11 would watch the landing from above and radio us clear or not clear before we opened the cage. Chris, the electrician, would stay up top with Danny and keep pressure on the leg. Raphael would hold the framed room and keep everyone in it silent. One trip. Get Owen. Come straight up. If we didn't have him in 5 minutes, we came up anyway. Because 5 minutes was how long I figured we could run that machine before every infected in the neighborhood was pointed at it. The trouble started before we even got the cage moving. The power flickered. Not off flicker, the work lights dipping and coming back. The kind of dip that on a normal day means the utility's got a problem 3 miles away and you don't think about it. But it wasn't a normal day. And I stood there with my hand on the hoist control and thought about what Julie had said. That everything we needed was down there. And I thought about the fact that this machine that was about to carry me down into a building full of infected ran on a city grid that was flickering. And for the first time all morning, I felt genuinely afraid in a way I couldn't manage by making a plan. You still want to do this? Manny said, watching the lights. No, I said. Let's go. We went down. I'm not going to pretend it was quiet, because it wasn't. And the not quiet is the whole point. The motor engaged, and the mast started talking, and we descended the outside of the building in a lit steel cage that announced us to the entire street. And through the mesh, I could see them turning down on Halsted. On the sidewalk. In the alley, heads coming up. Bodies orienting toward the moving noise on the side of the building, the way that man's head had followed Raphael through the fence. Manny ran it as gently as the machine allowed. It didn't matter. You can't sneak a hoist, then Julie's voice came over the radio, tight and even. Landing looks clear from up here. I can see the mechanical room door. It's shut. I don't see Owen. Wait, I hear banging. Somebody's banging on something. It's coming from inside, from the mechanical room side, I think. Eric, go slow at the bottom. We came level with the podium landing, and Manny feathered it in, and I got the cage gate open onto the concrete landing. And it was the way Julie said clear. For the moment, the big roll down that separated the landing from the rest of the podium leveled down and shut, which is what had kept it clear. And behind the roll down, I could hear them. The infected. drawn by our noise now, pushing at the corrugated steel. And off to the left, the mechanical room door, shut, and behind it, banging. A human, rhythmic, desperate banging. And a voice muffled, "Here, I'm in here, is somebody?" "Owen," Manny called, not too loud. "It's Manny. Open the door, we got the hoist, come on." The banging stopped. Then it started again, frantic, and Owen's voice cracking. "I can't. The door's jammed, something fell against it. I can't get it open, please." That mechanical room door swings out into the landing, and it had a self-closer, and the frame had never been shimmed right. I'd written it up on a punch list weeks ago, and if debris had shifted against it on the inside, a scared man pushing wasn't going to move it. But it opened outward, which meant we needed to pull from the landing side, and the debris inside would come with the door, not block it. "Owen, stop pushing," I said. Low and hard through the door, the voice I use when a kid on his first job is about to do something that'll hurt him. "Stop pushing, step back. We're pulling from out here. Get your hands off the door and get back." I got the pry bar into the gap at the latch edge, and Manny got his fingers around the edge, and we hauled, "Sen na say any rain," and the door dragged open 6 inches against whatever was behind it. And there was Owen's face in the gap, young, filthy, terrified. And behind him, in the dark mechanical room, I could see what had fallen, a stack of pipe, insulation, and a rolling gang box that had drifted against the door. And I could also hear, over my shoulder, the roll down starting to lose. The infected behind it had found the gap at the bottom, and the corrugated steel was buckling where they pushed. And it was going to fail, not now, but soon, minutes. And the radio in my hand said Julie's voice, "Eric, the roll down. I can see it moving from up here. They're getting under it. You've got maybe 2 minutes. Get him and go." "Owen, come through the gap, sideways, come on!" And Owen, instead of coming, turned around and reached back into the dark room. "Owen!" Manny hissed. "What are you—" "My phone. My kids' pictures are on my phone. It's right there." Now, here is where Julie made the mistake she'd carry. And I want to be careful how I tell it, because it wasn't stupid, and it wasn't even wrong exactly. It was the kind of mistake that comes straight out of a person's best quality. I said, "Leave the phone. Come now." And I meant it. And I was reaching through the gap to grab a fistful of his shirt and drag him out. And Julie's voice on the radio, because she could hear him through my open mic, said, "Eric, let him get it. If you drag him, he'll fight you. If he gets the phone, he'll come. Give him 5 seconds. Don't turn him into dead weight." And she wasn't wrong about people. That's the thing. She was completely right about people. A panicking man you drag will fight you and cost you more than 5 seconds. A panicking man who gets the one thing he can't leave will follow you anywhere after. In a bank lobby, in a fire drill, in any human situation, she was right. And I hesitated, my hand on Owen's shirt. And I gave him the 5 seconds. He turned back into the room and grabbed for the phone on top of the gang box and knocked it into the gap behind the box and went after it. 5 seconds becoming 10, 10 becoming 15. And out behind me, the roll down screamed and gave a foot at the bottom, and the first hand came under it, and Manny yelled, "Now, Owen, now!" And I gave up on the door and just reached both arms through the gap and got Owen under the arms and hauled. And he came through the gap scraping skin off both sides, phone in his fist, and we were shoving him into the cage while the roll down folded, and they came under it into the landing. We got the cage gate shut. Manny hit the drive. The motor engaged, and the cage lifted off the landing, just as they reached it. And one of them got a hand on the cage mesh, and then couldn't hold it as we rose and dropped away. And I watched the podium landing fill with them below us, drawn by all the noise we'd made, and I thought, that landing is theirs now. That's a way in we no longer own. And we bought it with 15 seconds and a phone. I didn't say any of that to Julie when we got up top. She met us at the edge, saw Owen alive, saw all three of us in the cage, and I watched her do the math on my face. She knew we'd cut it too close. She'd heard the roll down go over the radio. She knew the 5 seconds had cost us. And she opened her mouth and then closed it. I didn't lecture her. There was nothing to say that she didn't already know. And lecturing her would have been for me, not for the situation. We had Owen. We'd lost the landing. Both were true. You carry both, but something had changed while we were down there. And I felt it the second I stepped off the cage onto 11. The work lights were dimmer. Not off. Dimmer and steady dim. Not flickering, which was worse, because a flicker is a problem coming and going. And a steady dim is the grid dropping voltage under a load it can't hold. The whole city pulling on a system that was failing. I went to the temporary panel on 11 and looked at it. And I don't need to be an electrician to read a panel that's browning out. The hoist had run on that. If it dropped much further, the hoist wouldn't run at all. And neither would the lights. And neither would anything. I went to the hose bib on the water riser and cracked it, and got a strong stream, then a weaker one, then a dribble, then air, which told me the temporary water pump feeding the riser had just lost power. And whatever was in the riser above us was all we were getting now. And it was construction water anyway, non-potable, and our drinking water was 40 bottles minus what 12 scared people had already gone through, which was already more than I'd budgeted. I stood there with the dead hose bib in my hand, and I finally fully understood the thing Julie had said hours ago, the thing I'd filed wrong. High is just far from the door. I'd taken us up into a building I knew, and I knew it so well I'd trusted it. And the thing I hadn't put together, though I knew every piece of it separately, the temporary water, the temporary power, the incomplete everything, was that this building's safety wasn't finished being built. The concrete was real. The concrete would hold up a mountain. But the concrete didn't keep you alive. The water pump kept you alive, and the water pump ran on a grid that was dying. And I had confused a strong building with a safe one, because strong buildings were the thing I understood. Julie came and stood next to me. She looked at the dead hose bib, and at the dim lights, and she didn't say "I told you so." She never once said it all day, and I've thought about that a lot since. She just said, "So how long can we actually be up here?" "Not as long as I thought this morning," I said. "Give me the real number." "Water's the number. We've got maybe a day of drinking water for 12 people if nobody moves much. The pump's down, so it's not coming back on its own. Food's a day, day and a half. If the power drops all the way, we lose the hoist, and then it's all stairs." I made myself say the rest, because she'd earned the whole truth, and because saying it out loud was the only way I was going to get out ahead of it. I built the plan this morning on this being a place we could sit and wait out the street. It's not that place. It was never going to be that place. We need to be planning a way down and out, not a way to hold. And we need to do it while we still have light and while the hoist still runs, which might not be long. She nodded slowly. She didn't gloat, and she didn't soften it. Then we planned the way down. "Controlled," I said. "Not tonight, not in a panic. We've got hours of daylight. I want to know which stair is clear. I want to stage water and the injured man. I want to pick a floor and a route and do it once, right? Sequence it. Assign it. Correct it. Even then, even standing at a dead hose bib with the lights going brown. I reached for the thing I knew. A plan, a schedule, a controlled descent, because that was the only tool I had that had ever worked. And it might have worked. I still think, if we'd had the 2 hours I thought we had, it might have worked. We didn't have 2 hours. Owen was sitting against the core wall with his phone clutched in both hands, not even looking at it, just holding it, and Danny was gray but stable, and Chris was checking his dressing, and Dolores had started praying again. Quiet. And for about 10 minutes, the floor was as calm as it was going to get. I got the radios sorted and put Raphael on watching the hoist edge and Manny on resting, because he'd earned it. And I started walking the floor to think through the stairs. There are 2 stair cores in this building. The main core on the south side and a secondary egress stair on the north. Code requires 2, so you always have a second way down. In a finished building, both would be sealed concrete shafts with rated doors, pressurized, clean. In this building, the north stair was fully poured and doored, but the south stair still had temporary plywood doors on some landings and open penetrations where the pipe and conduit ran through holes, basically floor to floor, that hadn't been fire stopped yet, because fire stopping happens near the end of a job. I knew that. I'd known it all day. It was on a punch list with my name on it. I just hadn't thought about it in the same breath as everything else. Because you think about problems one at a time, in the sequence you're going to fix them. It was Aisha, the teenage girl, who noticed first. She'd been sitting closest to the south stair door, the temporary plywood one, and she wrinkled her nose and said, to nobody, "Does anybody else smell that?" I did the second she said it. Everybody did. It's a smell you can't mistake and can't ignore, sharp, chemical, wrong. The smell of insulation and plastic conduit starting to cook. Burning wire, burning plastic. Down low and coming up. I went to the south stair door and put the back of my hand against the plywood, the way you're trained to. And it wasn't hot. But when I cracked it, the smell rolled out thick, and there was haze in the stairwell, gray, moving, and it wasn't coming down from above. It was climbing up from below, up the open shaft, up through every unfire-stopped penetration in a stair core that was never finished being made safe. And somewhere down there, a temporary panel, a browned-out circuit under load, a shorted feed, I'd never know exactly, though I could guess something had finally caught, in a building with no working sprinklers and no compartmentation, and 100 open holes for smoke to climb. I shut the plywood door and stood there with my hand still on it and made myself think. Fast, the way you have to. The south stair was the closer one, the one nearest the hoist and the framed rooms, and it was already full of smoke. And it was the one with the open penetrations, which meant it would only get worse and it would take the smoke everywhere. The north stair, the good stair, the fully poured and doored one, was all the way across the floor, past the open edge. And I did not yet know if it was clear, because smoke does what it wants in an unfinished building, and I hadn't checked it. I'd been busy being right about water. I called Raphael and Manny and told them, low and flat, no panic, because panic on a floor with a smoke problem gets people killed, that we had a fire below, and we needed to move to the north stair, and we needed to move now. Controlled, injured man first. And I sent Manny to hold the hoist just in case, though I didn't trust it. And I crossed the floor to the north stair door with Julie right behind me. I put my hand on the north stair door. We had one stairwell left, and the smoke was already in it. Not thick, though. That was the thing I made myself see instead of the thing I was afraid of. When I cracked the north stair door, there was smoke in it. But it was high, a layer up near the underside of the slab above, gray and drifting. not the churning solid gray that had rolled out of the south stair. The north stair was the good one, fully poured, doored at every landing. And its doors had actually held, except where I had, weeks ago, or one of my guys had propped a couple open with wood scraps to move material through. Smoke was getting in through those propped landings. It wasn't roaring up the shaft the way it was in the south core, because this shaft was mostly sealed. Mostly. I put my hand flat on the concrete of the door frame. Cool. I leaned my head in low, below the smoke layer, and looked down, and the stair was clear of fire and clear of people for the 3 flights I could see. Down at 9 or 8, there was more haze pushing in from somewhere, but the air near the floor was breathable. "It's the better stair," I said, pulling back. "Smoke's up high in it, not down low. If we stay low, we can use it, but not for long and not all the way to the street." Julie was crouched next to me. "Why not all the way?" "Because I don't know what's below 8, and because that smoke's coming into this stair from somewhere around 9. And the lower we go, the closer we get to where it's actually burning." I sat back on my heels. My eyes were already stinging. "And because the street's the worst place in the city right now anyway. We don't want the street. We want the podium." I need to explain the podium because everything after this was about the podium. The tower sits on a podium, a fat, low base, 4 levels, that fills the whole block. Levels of it are structured parking with a service core, and the podium roof is where the tower proper starts. The podium is more building than tower is. It's got real concrete walls where the tower has cabled edges. It's more enclosed, it's got interior ramps. And the podium has 2 ways out to the world. One is the main vehicle exit onto Halstead, which was the street, which was where the worst of it was. The other was a contractor's service ramp on the back side of the block, on the alley side, cutting out to Delaney Street through a gap in the block. Delaney was a quiet one-way we used for concrete trucks and material deliveries. It faced away from Halstead. It might be less of a killing floor than the front. The catch was that the service ramp wasn't a public exit. It was a construction access, and I'd had my own guys barricade the mouth of it 3 days ago with concrete barriers and stacked material and a rolling gate to keep people from wandering into the site off Delaney at night. I knew exactly how it was assembled because I'd stood there and told them how to assemble it. "So the plan's the same shape," Julie said. She'd caught it, the way she caught everything. Down, but not to the street. Down to the podium, out the back. "Down to the podium, out the back," I said. "Which means we've got a couple ways to get from here to the podium. The stair, low and fast, if it stays breathable. Or the Hoist's landings hit the podium level too. And I'd rather not choose one and find out halfway that I was wrong." Behind us, the floor had gone quiet and scared in the particular way a group goes quiet when the adults stop talking about hope and start talking about roots. Dolores had stopped praying out loud. Gordon had put his dead phone in his pocket. Aisha was standing very close to the young couple. Chris, the electrician, had gotten Danny sitting up against the core wall, and Danny's leg was wrapped tight and dark, and he was awake but wrong-colored. And Owen was next to him with the retrieved phone still in his fist. 12 of us. One who couldn't walk on his own. Smoke coming up 2 stairs, one bad, one going bad slower. Power browning, water gone. That was the situation. And standing there being afraid of it wasn't going to change it. "Okay," I said. And I raised my voice just enough to carry to the room without carrying off the floor. "Listen up. We're going down. Not to the street. The street's the worst place there is right now. We're going to a lower level, the parking podium, and out the back where it's quieter. We're going to do it in the next few minutes, not the next hour, because of the smoke. I need everybody doing exactly what I say, and I need everybody quiet, because those things come to noise. You've all seen that. Quiet keeps us alive. Julie stepped in beside me, and she did the part I can't do. "We're going to move as a group," she said, warm and steady, like she was walking a bank lobby through a fire drill and not a collapse. "Nobody gets left. We'll go slow enough that everyone keeps up. If you're scared, that's fine. You're supposed to be scared. Just keep your hand on the shoulder of the person in front of you and keep breathing low." Can everybody do that for me? They could. That's the thing, they could, for her, in a way they couldn't have for me. I give orders. She gives people something to hold on to. I'd forgotten how much that was worth. Or I'd never known it. Or I'd known it and been too busy being the guy who gives orders to say so. Then Manny said the thing that reorganized the whole plan. The hoist won't take all of us in one trip anymore. He'd come over from the edge, and his face was doing the thing an operator's face does when the machine is telling him something, and he doesn't like it. Power's low. I ran it up with 3 of us, and it labored. 12? Down? With the voltage where it is now, I don't want to load that cage full and have it stall between floors with everybody hanging in it. I can take small loads, or... He glanced at Danny. "I take the ones who can't do stairs, and the rest of you take the north stair, and we all meet at the podium landing." There it was. Split the group. I hate splitting a group. Every instinct I have says keep your crew together. One plan, one place. But Manny was right about the machine, and I knew he was right, because I'd felt it labor on the way up too, and told myself it was fine. "How small a load?" I said. 3. 4 if they're light and I go slow. Danny and Danny plus 2, and I run it down to the podium landing. Then I could come back up for... "No," I said. "No coming back up. 1 trip down for the cage. We don't gamble on the power giving you a second trip." I looked at the floor. 12 people. The math wasn't hard, and it wasn't kind. Manny takes Danny and Dolores. Raphael rides with them. If the cage stalls or Danny has to be moved fast, Manny needs another able-bodied man in there. Chris comes with us on the stairs. "I hear you," Manny said, and he meant it. Julie was watching me sort people, and I braced for her to fight me on the split, because the old Julie would have. Because the old Julie hated being handed a finished decision. But she didn't. She said quietly, just to me, "You're right that it can't be one load. But you keep the strongest people out of that cage and on the stairs with the weakest. If the cage stalls, Manny's stuck with 3 people who can't self-rescue and no way to help them. Put one strong person in there." She was right, and I hadn't seen it. And I felt the old flinch, the flinch of being corrected, and then I let it go, because we didn't have room for the flinch. "Raphael," I said, "you ride the cage. You're strong and you keep your head. If it stalls, you're the one who can get people out of landing gate." Raphael nodded. Julie gave me a very small look, not triumph, just a kind of acknowledgement, and moved on. We staged it fast. Manny got Danny into the cage first, then Dolores, then Chris crouched by Danny's leg, then Raphael. That was 4 in the cage. I did the count in my head, 12 of us. 4 going down on the hoist, which left 8 on the stairs. Me, Julie, Owen, Gordon, Aisha, and the 2 of the young couple. 6, plus I counted again. Slower, because in the brown light with the smoke coming, I did not want to be wrong about a number that was people. Me, Julie, Owen, Gordon, Aisha, the young man, the young woman. 7 on the stairs, 4 on the hoist, 11, and then I had it, because I'd left myself out once. 8 on the stairs, 4 on the hoist, 12. I looked at the 4 of them in the cage, at the browned-out work lights making everything the color of a dirty nickel, and I said, "Podium landing. Don't open till we're there." Manny hit the drive. The motor engaged, labored, caught, and the cage started down the outside of the building, slow, the mast talking. And I watched it drop away and thought about how much noise it was making on the outside of a building where noise was death, and how there was nothing to do about that except go fast on our end. "Everybody else," I said. "Stare, now. Hand on the shoulder in front of you. Stay low. Julie, you're behind me. Owen." Owen was staring at the descending cage like he wanted to be on it. "Owen, you're walking. Can you walk?" "I can walk," Owen said. His voice was thin. The kid was maybe 23, and he'd been trapped alone in a dark mechanical room for an hour, listening to things scratch at a roll-down. And I could see he was running on fumes, but his legs worked. "I can walk." I opened the north stair door. Going down a smoke-charged stair is nothing like going down a stair. You stay low, below the layer, which means you're half-crouched the whole way. One hand on the rail, and the rail is cold concrete and your thighs burn. And every landing you have to decide whether the door beside you is holding smoke back or letting it in. I went first because I knew which landings had propped doors and which didn't. I thought I knew. And I called them back over my shoulder in a low voice. 10. Clear. Keep moving. 9. Doors cracked. Smoke's coming in here. Move fast through it. Don't breathe deep. The smoke got worse at 9. Thick enough that I lost sight of the flight below for a second and had to trust the rail. And behind me, somebody coughed, and somebody else made a small, terrified sound. And Julie's voice, low, said, "You're okay. Keep your hand on my shoulder. We're almost through it." To whoever it was. We came onto the 8th landing, and the air cleared a little. The door here was shut and holding. And I stopped everybody for 3 seconds to let them get a breath. Because you can't run people through smoke without letting them breathe, or they start making mistakes. That's when I made mine. Below 8, the north stair ran down to the podium roof at what we called the 7 level, and then into the podium itself. And I knew, the way you know a thing you've walked 100 times, that between the tower stair and the podium stair there was a fire-rated door. A real one, a heavy steel door in a block wall that we'd hung 2 weeks ago because it was in the critical path for the temporary certificate we needed. I'd signed the inspection on it. A real self-closing rated door, which meant that if I got everyone through it and shut it behind us, we'd have a solid wall between us and whatever smoke was in the tower stair. I told them that. I said, "There's a real door at the bottom, a steel one. Once we're through it and it shuts, we're in the podium and the smoke's behind us." I said it to give them something to run toward, and I believed it. And I led them down the last flights, fast, on the strength of it. The door was propped open with a stack of drywall. Somebody had needed to move material through it this week, after I'd stopped walking every floor personally, after the job got busy. And I started trusting my picture of the site over the site. And they'd propped my rated door open with half a pallet of drywall and never closed it, which meant it wasn't a wall anymore. It was a hole, and the smoke that was in the tower stair was pouring through it into the podium stair below. And the podium stair below, which I had counted on being clean, was full. I stopped so hard that Owen ran into Julie, and Julie ran into me. "What?" Julie said. "The door's propped." I was already dragging drywall sheets out of the way, and they were heavy, 50-pound sheets, and there were 8 of them, and the smoke was coming through the gap the whole time I worked. "It's supposed to be shut. It's supposed to seal this off. Somebody propped it, and now the podium stair's got smoke in it." I got the last sheet clear, and the door's closer started swinging it shut, and I caught it and held it. I was wrong. The door's not doing what I said it would. Podium stairs not clean. I want to be honest that for 1 second, I stood there with my hand on that door, hating myself. Because it was my door, my inspection, my site. And I'd told these people it would save them, and it had been propped open the whole time by my own not watching. And then Julie put her hand flat on my back, not soft, just firm, and said, "Okay, so it's not clean. Is it usable or not?" And that snapped me out of it, because that was the only question that mattered. I leaned through the door into the podium stair, low, and looked. Smoke, but thinner than the tower stair. The prop door had only been feeding it a little while, and the podium had more volume to fill. Down one more flight, I could see the landing that led out onto the parking level. The level where the Hoist landing was, where Manny was supposed to be. And down there, past the smoke, I could hear the Hoist motor cut off the cage arriving, and then, a beat later, something I didn't want to hear. Movement. On the parking level, not the cage. Feet, and the wet sound of them, and a low, broken sound that a person doesn't make. They were in the podium. I pulled back and got the door shut behind us. The whole group crammed into the 8.5 landing space. 12 minus the 4 in the cage, so 8 of us, in a concrete box the size of a closet, and I got low and I made myself think instead of react. "There's infected on the parking level," I said low. "I don't know how many. Manny's cage is down there. We can't just go pouring out onto that level." Julie's radio crackled. She'd kept one. Manny had one. His voice came through, tight and fast and quiet. "Eric, you there? We're at the podium landing. I'm not opening the gate. There's some of them out here. On the level, 3, 4. They came up the vehicle ramp from the street, I think. They're between us and the ramp we need. Raphael's got a bar. Danny can't run, Eric. What do you want me to do?" I keyed the radio. "Do not open the gate. Sit tight. We're 1 flight up. Give me a second." I looked at the group. I looked at Owen, who was gray and shaking. I looked at Julie, who was already looking at me with a specific expression that meant she had half a thought and was waiting to see if I had the other half. "The parking level's an open floor, right?" she said. "Not rooms. Open with columns." "Mostly, yeah. Structured parking. Columns, ramps, some block walls around the cores. So if the cage is on one side, and those things are near the cage between it and the back ramp." She was building it as she went. "Then we're above them. And we could come out somewhere else. Draw them or go around them. It's not a corridor. It's a floor with pillars." She was right. That was the thing about the podium. It wasn't a hallway you had to fight down. It was an open concrete floor. And open floors have geometry. If I could get us onto that floor at a point away from Manny's cage, we could move sideways, use the columns, and get to the back ramp without walking through the 4 infected clustered by the Hoist. And better if the 4 by the Hoist were watching the cage. Then something noisy on the far side of the floor would pull them, and give Manny and the injured people a window to get out of the cage and to the ramp. "Okay," I said. "New shape. This stair dumps out on the parking level near the middle. There's a second way onto the level, a man door in the block wall on the north side, off this same stair, 1 turn down. It puts us out behind the columns on the far side from the cage. We go out there, quiet, and we move along the columns toward the back ramp. Meanwhile," I keyed the radio. "Manny, in about 2 minutes, I'm going to make noise on the far side of the level, away from you. When those things move toward the noise, you get everybody out of the cage and to the back service ramp, the one my guys barricaded, the Delaney side. You don't wait for the barrier to be open. You just get to it and hold there low and quiet till I get there and open it. You copy? Copy, Manny said. Away from us. Back ramp. Hold and wait. What noise? Julie said. And I was already working it out because I had the answer in my hand. I had one of the site radios. Manny had another down at the cage. And there were 2 more in the gang box, except the gang box was up on 11. But 2 was enough. The radios, I said. I plant one across the floor on the far side and leave it keyed to receive. Then somebody keys another one and talks into it steady. Doesn't matter what, just voice. Hold the transmit button down. And the one I planted plays it out loud over there. It'll carry across that concrete. They'll go to it, same as they go to everything. And nobody has to stand over there to make the noise. Julie was already nodding. So you plant it and get back, and I hold the button up here from the stair. You hold the button, I said. Talk low and steady into it. Keep it transmitting, and don't stop until I say. The planted one does the rest on its own. Owen, who hadn't said a word since the stair, looked at the phone in his fist, and then at the radio in my hand, and I saw him understand that his phone wasn't the thing that was going to matter here. And something in his face, I don't know, some small, ashamed relief. And he closed his hand around the phone and put it in his pocket and left it there. Do it, Julie said. Here's how it went. And I'll give it to you straight because it did not go clean. I went out the north man door first, alone, low, into the parking level, with one site radio in my hand keyed to receive. It was exactly like I'd pictured the open concrete floor, forest of columns, the smoke a thin ceiling up near the slab, gray daylight coming in from the open west face where the exterior wasn't clad yet. Across the floor, maybe 100 feet, I could see the hoist cage sitting at its landing, and the 4 infected. And they were doing what Manny said, drifting near the cage, drawn to the 4 people inside it, hands occasionally coming up against the mesh. One of them was in a delivery uniform. One had been a woman in office clothes. They didn't move like people. They moved like the man at the fence had orienting to sound, to the small movements inside the cage, patient in a way that was worse than fast. I went the other direction, away from them, along the north columns, toward the west face where the open edge was, and I set the radio down behind a column near the open edge, volume up as high as it went, and got the hell back behind the next column, and I keyed my own. No, I didn't have a second one. Julie had it. I got low behind the column, and I said into nothing, then remembered. And I keyed the radio in the stair the only way I could, which was I couldn't. Julie had it. I lifted my hand to my mouth out of habit and had nothing in it. And I understood I'd already done my part. The planted radio was live and receiving, and the rest was Julie's. Her voice came out of the planted radio across the floor a second later, tinny and loud and bouncing off the slab and the columns. This way. Come to me. This way. That's it. Keep coming. The same words she'd used at the alley gate. Steady and level and endless. Transmitted from the stair and blaring out of a handheld, propped against a column 100 feet from anyone. And every one of the 4 heads snapped toward it. And they came not fast, but altogether drawn, drifting, then hurrying toward the voice on the far side, away from the cage, exactly the way I'd hoped, exactly the way sound had worked all day. I got back to the man door and hissed into the stair. Now, Manny, go. And Julie, one flight up with the other radio, kept her thumb down and kept talking, low and steady, feeding the planted radio its voice. And I heard, across the floor, the cage gate open, and I risked a look. and there was Raphael and Manny getting Danny out of the cage, with Dolores moving behind them, and Dolores moving faster than I'd have credited. All four of them coming off the cage and moving along the south columns toward the back of the level, toward where the Delaney ramp was. And the four infected were all clustered at the far west column around a radio playing Julie's voice. And for about 10 seconds, it was working perfectly. Then Julie sent the rest of the group out the man door behind me. She'd handed the transmitting radio to Aisha with her thumb still on the button and a whispered, "Keep talking into it, just like that. Don't stop. And come behind us," and we started along the north columns to loop around toward the back ramp and meet Manny's group there. And Gordon, the suit. Gordon, who'd been holding it together all day, Warden saw the four infected clustered at the column 40 feet away and froze. Just froze, mid-floor, out from behind cover, and made a sound. Not a scream, a gasp, a sharp intake, the kind of involuntary thing a terrified person can't help. But it was a human sound in the middle of an open concrete floor. And one of the four heads turned from the radio toward us. I've thought about what happened next 100 times, and I still don't know if there was a better version of it. Julie moved. She was closest to Gordon, and she got a hand over the front of him, not his mouth, his chest, pulling him back behind the column with her. And she got right in front of his face, and she did the thing. The calm, low, steady thing. Look at me. Breathe. We're going. You're okay." And it worked. Gordon got behind the column and got quiet, but the head that had turned kept turning. And then a second one turned. Two of the four peeling off from the radio and drifting our way, toward where the human sound had come from. And now we had two coming at us across the north side of the floor and two still at the radio. "Keep moving," I said low. "Column to column. Don't run, don't stop. Keep the columns between you and them." And I got the group moving along the north edge toward the back ramp, and the two infected followed. But they followed the way they did, losing the line when we broke sight behind a column, reorienting, always a beat behind if we kept moving and kept quiet. It's a horrible way to travel, letting a thing that wants to kill you drift along 40 feet off your shoulder. But I'd learned by then that running was worse. Running made noise, and noise made more of them. And the only thing that had kept anyone alive all day was moving quiet and steady and using the concrete. We made the back corner of the level, where the Delaney service ramp came up. And Manny's group was already there, crouched low behind the last row of columns and the concrete barriers. And now all 8 plus 4 of us were together again in the one spot. And 40 feet out on the open floor, 2 infected were drifting toward us with 2 more still hung up on a radio, playing a woman's steady voice. And between us and out was the barrier I'd told my own guys to build. The barrier was concrete jersey barriers, the low interlocking kind set across the mouth of the ramp, with a stack of banded lumber behind them and a rolling construction gate, chained, that we'd put in as a man gate for when the barriers were up. I knew exactly how it went together, because I'd stood on that spot and specified it. Barriers to stop a vehicle, gate for a person, chain and a padlock. And the key to the padlock was on the sight ring. And the sight ring was in my truck, which was outside the fence, on a street full of infected. I did not have the key. "I don't have the padlock key," I said low to Julie and Manny, crouched behind the barrier. "It's in my truck." Manny said, "Bolt cutters. There's a set in the gang box on the..." and stopped because the gang box was up on 11. "Chain's not the way," I said, because I was already looking at it the way you look at a thing you built. The gate was chained, yeah. But the gate was hung on a rolling track, The same kind of grit-fouled rolling track as the south gate that had screamed like a saw. And I was not going to drag a screaming steel gate across a fouled track 40 feet from 4 infected. But the gate wasn't the only thing between us and Delaney. The barriers were. And I knew exactly how they sat, because I'd laid them out a line of Jersey barriers, the ends butted and pinned together where they interlocked. Each one 600 pounds of concrete that no 3 men were going to pick up and carry anywhere quiet. But they weren't anchored. They just sat. And at the end of the line, where the last barrier met the ramp curb, there was already a hand's-width gap where it hadn't seated flush against its neighbor. I didn't need to move a barrier across the floor. I needed to swing one end of the last barrier out, pivot it on the far corner, and widen that gap to person width. That I could do not by muscle, but with a bar. We don't open the gate, I said. We move one barrier, not carry it, pivot it. There's already a gap at the end. I get the pry bar under the near end, lever it up off the concrete, and you two walk that end out while it's up on the bar. One corner at a time. It'll grind, and it'll make noise. And the second it does, those things are coming. But it opens us a gap wide enough to go through single file, and I don't have to touch the screaming gate at all. Julie was already reading the floor. Then everyone else needs to be lined up and ready to go through the second the gap's open. Not milling, lined up. Injured first. Danny goes through first with Chris because he's slowest, then the rest. Then you 3 last. She looked at the 2 infected drifting closer through the columns, and the radio across the floor still going. Aisha's voice now, thinner than Julie's but steady, keep coming this way. And I thought about how long a charged handheld would hold a transmit before somebody's thumb tired or the battery flagged a while. Longer than a phone, but not forever. And it needs to be fast, Julie said, because that distraction won't hold them all day. Here's the part where it got hard and where the day's real lesson landed on me, and I want to tell it plain. I looked at the banded lumber stacked behind the barriers. Good lumber. And behind it, the material we'd staged, and I had this reflex, this deep worksite reflex, that said grab the tools, grab the good stuff. You're going to need lumber and rope and a pry bar and a screw gun. Wherever you're going, you don't leave good material behind. You don't walk off a site empty-handed. And I actually said it. I started to say, Raphael, grab the... And I looked at the 2 infected 40 feet out becoming 4. And I looked at Danny Gray against the column, and I stopped. Because you can't lever a 600-pound barrier and carry lumber and move an injured man and stay quiet. Not with the seconds we had. And every second I spent loading a man up with material was a second Danny sat exposed on that floor. And the whole day had been me trusting my picture of what mattered: the fence, the door, the schedule, the good stuff you don't leave behind, over the actual people in front of me. Tools mattered. Prep mattered. It had mattered all day. But you cannot schedule an injured man around a lumber pile. I kept the pry bar because I needed it, and I left everything else. Leave the material, I said. All of it. Hands empty except who's carrying Danny. We move the barrier, we go through, we don't take anything we have to think about. Raphael looked at me. He knew what that lumber was worth in a collapsing city. And then he nodded and left it. I got the flat end of the pry bar down into the seam under the near corner of the last barrier and set the fulcrum on a chunk of broken block. And I leaned my whole weight down on the long end, and the near end of the barrier came up off the concrete an inch. 2 inches. Enough, that's all leverage is. You don't lift the thing. You rob it of one point of contact and let it pivot on the other. Now walk it out, that corner, while it's up, I said through my teeth. and Manny and Raphael got their shoulders low against the raised end and shoved it sideways, and the barrier pivoted on its far corner and ground on the concrete, a low, hard scrape you felt in your teeth. I reset the bar and levered again. Second pivot, scrape, and now the gap at the end of the line was starting to open, a foot, then two. The infected came. Not sprinting, they don't sprint, but coming, closing the 40 feet in that terrible drifting hurry. And Julie's voice, low and even, not a shout, threading the whole line. Go, Chris, go, straight through, don't stop. Owen, go, 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 keep going. Feeding them through the 2-foot gap one at a time, while I got the bar under the corner a third time and levered, and Manny and Raphael walked the end out another foot. Danny and Chris went through, the young couple. Aisha slipped through sideways, and she pressed the transmitting radio into Julie's hand as she went, still keyed, Julie's own recorded live voice looping back into her hand. Dolores caught her hip on the barrier and stuck for a second. And I saw the nearest infected close to 15 feet, 10. And Julie let go of the transmit button and stepped out from the back of the line, out toward the thing, and clapped her hands once. Hard, one loud crack of sound, and it turned toward her instead of Dolores. And in the 2 seconds that bought, Dolores got through the gap. And now, Julie was out from behind the barrier, with an infected coming at her, and I was on the wrong side of the barrier, with a pry bar in my hands. I want to tell you I planned what I did. I didn't. I dropped the bar and came around the end of the barrier and got Julie by the back of her blazer and pulled hard backward through the gap. And the infected, the delivery uniform one, came through the gap after us, its hand catching on the barrier's rough edge. And that half-second of it fouling on the barrier was the half-second Raphael needed to snatch up the pry bar I'd dropped. And I'm not going to dress it up. He put the bar into the side of its head, and it went down in the gap and didn't get up. And its body in the gap slowed the other 3 behind it. And that was our window. Through, everybody through. And we went, all of us, through the gap and down the Delaney service ramp, out from under the podium slab and into gray open daylight on a back street, leaving the barrier and the lumber and the tower and everything in it behind. Somewhere back on the parking level, a sight radio was still lying against a column, still faintly playing a woman's steady voice to an empty stretch of concrete, and we left that too. Delaney was better than Halstead. Not safe, nothing was safe, but better. It was a narrow one-way, and it faced away from the worst of it. And the block of it right at the ramp mouth was hemmed by the podium wall on one side and a long blank warehouse wall on the other. So there was only one direction the trouble could really come from, and it wasn't coming yet. The 3 infected still on the podium level were behind us, on the wrong side of a barrier and a body. And by the time they sorted out the gap, we'd be gone. But we couldn't stand on Delaney either. We were 12 people, one carried, out in the open on a city street on the first day of the end of the world. And I had no truck. My truck was on the far side of the block on Halstead, and even if I'd had it, it didn't hold 12. Manny said it. The yard. I knew what he meant before he finished. 2 blocks down Delaney, on the same quiet side, there was a masonry supply yard, a block and brick supplier we bought from. A walled yard with a low office building and a warehouse. And I knew the owner. And I knew the yard had a real block wall around it, 8 feet, and 1 gate, because I'd driven a forklift through that gate a dozen times, picking up short loads. A walled masonry yard on a quiet back street 2 blocks off. Was not a fortress, and it was not paradise, and it was not the plan for the rest of our lives. But it was walls, and 1 gate, and it was away from the tower and the smoke and the front street. And right then, it was the best thing within reach, that a person could walk an injured man too. 2 blocks, I told the group, low. There's a walled yard. Block walls, 1 gate. We're going there. Same as before, quiet together, hand on the shoulder. Injured man in the middle this time, so he's covered. Let's go. We went. Down Delaney, close to the warehouse wall, in a tight, quiet column. And I watched the cross streets, and Julie watched the people, and Manny and Raphael took the front and the back with the 2 pry bars. And we passed a few things I won't describe, because they don't help. And we passed a couple of infected across the street that hadn't seen us, and we didn't give them a reason to. And it took maybe 10 minutes that felt like an hour. And then the yard's block wall came up on the right. And the gate, the rolling steel gate, was shut, which was good. And I got up to it and looked through the gap, and the yard was empty of the moving dead. And I got the gate rolled back just enough, on a track that, thank God, somebody had greased. And we got everybody in. And I got it rolled shut behind us, and dropped the drop pin into the hole in the concrete. And for the first time since 9:40 that morning, we were inside a real wall that went all the way around. The yard office was a cinder block box with a metal door, and it was unlocked because the owner had run like everybody else. And inside, there was a bathroom that worked on city water pressure that was, for now, still holding. And there was a water cooler with 2 full jugs. And there was a vending machine and a break room with a coffee maker and a box of somebody's protein bars in a desk drawer. And it wasn't a stockpile, but it was more than we'd had in the tower. And it was walls. Chris got Danny onto the break room couch and got a real look at the leg in real light. And he checked the dressing and firmed it up and kept the leg raised. And when I asked him, he wouldn't tell me more than what he could see. The bleeding had slowed and Danny was still alert. And that was as much as any of us could honestly say. Dolores sat down in an office chair and started praying again, softly. And this time, it sounded less like fear and more like the other thing. I did a count. 12. All 12. Nobody bitten, nobody lost. One who couldn't walk far, but alive. On the worst day of my life, I had gotten 12 people out of a burning, unfinished building and across 2 blocks of a dead city. And I stood in the yard for a minute and let myself feel the size of that. And then I let it go, because it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that most of them were alive, because a bank manager had known how to keep frightened people from turning into a stampede. And because a hoist operator had known his machine's limits. And because a handheld radio had held 4 infected in one spot with a borrowed voice for 2 minutes. And because Raphael had a strong arm. And because Delaney faced the right way. I'd known the building. Knowing the building had bought us the first hour. It hadn't bought us the rest. Julie came and stood next to me by the yard wall while the others sorted themselves out inside. She had a cut on the back of one hand she hadn't mentioned, and her stockings were gone, and there was concrete dust in her hair, and she looked about how I felt. "You clapped at it," I said. "On purpose, to get it off Dolores. It was going to get her. It could have gotten you. It didn't." She said it flat, the way she said everything. And then, after a second, "You went around the barrier for me. You were clear. You didn't have to come back around." "Yeah, well." I didn't have anything to put after that. I looked at my hands, which were shaking a little now that there was nothing to hold. "I gave Owen his 5 seconds too, back there with the phone. Same as you did on the landing. Cost us the same way." I shook my head. I don't know what that means, if it means anything. It doesn't have to mean anything. She was watching the tower. You could see it from the yard, over the wall, 4 blocks off the whole gray stack of it going up into the smoke-hazed sky. And low on it, on the lower floors, you could see it now. The smoke staining out of a couple of the openings, gray-black smudges on the concrete where the fire was doing what a construction fire does. Eating the plastic and the wood and the packaging and the wire and making smoke, but not touching the concrete, which would still be standing there next year and the year after, holding up a building that never got finished being safe. The exterior hoist hung against the side of it, still dead now that the power was gone. The cage parked somewhere down at the podium where Manny had left it. This morning, that hoist starting to move had meant the tower wasn't empty, that my certainty about my own sight was wrong. Now it just hung there, a temporary thing on a temporary structure that had gotten us through one part of one day and no further. You know what I keep thinking, I said. I built the whole morning on that building being a place we could hold. It was never that. I knew every single thing that was wrong with it. The water, the power, the fire stopping, all of it. I could have listed it for you at 9 a.m. I just never put the list together and read it out loud. Julie didn't say anything for a second. Then she said, "You do that." It wasn't an accusation. It was almost fond, which was worse. You always could see every piece. You just... She stopped, and I braced for it. For the old fight, the you decided before you asked, the whole autopsy. But she didn't do the autopsy. We were too tired and too far past it, and too many people were alive because of what each of us was. "It doesn't matter," she said. "We got them out, both of us. That's the part that counts today." We spent that first night in the yard, and I'm not going to pretend it turned into a fortress, because it didn't. And it wasn't going to, and both of us knew it. City water was going to fail. The 2 jugs and the vending machine were a couple of days. The block wall was good, but one gate is one gate, and eventually the noise of the city, or the smoke, or hunger, was going to make us move again. This was a place that got us through a night, the way the tower got us through an afternoon. I'd finally learned to see them that way, as things that got you through one part of the collapse, not places you won. But we could think, at the yard. That was the thing walls bought you, time to think instead of react. And in the morning, we started thinking about the next move. The owner's flatbed was parked in the yard with the keys in the office, which would carry some of us and the injured, but not all of us. So it wasn't going to be a drive away into the sunset. It was going to be careful, staged, some walking and some riding, out of the dense core toward the edge of the city, where there was more space and fewer people and fewer of the dead. I started doing the thing I do. I had a scrap of paper from the office, and I was sketching the route out to the county road on the back of it, marking the blocks I knew were bad, and the ones that might be clear, and I heard myself start to sort the group. "Raphael, you take the front of the truck. Chris, you stay with Danny. Manny, you drive, since you're the one who and I was assigning it. The way I've assigned every job for 26 years, sequencing people onto a schedule." When I got to Julie, and my mouth was already forming the next assignment, and I stopped. Because I was about to tell her where to stand and what to watch, the way I'd have told a foreman, the way I'd told her 1,000 times about 1,000 things in 22 years of marriage, informing her of a decision I'd already finished making. And it had worked on a job. And it had not worked in a house. And it had almost gotten Dolores killed today at the barrier, when the thing that actually saved her was Julie standing out in the open, making a decision I hadn't scheduled, clapping her hands at a dead man on her own read of the moment, because she'd seen something I couldn't, and acted on it without waiting for me to finish deciding. So I didn't finish the assignment. The site radio Manny had carried down was sitting on the desk between us, the last working one. The thing you'd use to talk between the two ends of a moving group, strung out over a couple of blocks. I picked it up and I held it out to her. "You take this side," I said. "The back half of the group and this radio. Whoever's on foot behind the truck. You call it however you read it." That was all. I didn't say, because I trust you. And I didn't say you were right at the barrier. And I didn't say any of the things a man says when he's trying to get credit for finally learning something at 48. I just held out the radio and told her which half of the group was hers. And I meant it the whole way down that she'd make calls back there I wouldn't see and wouldn't second guess. That if she gave somebody one chance too many again, it'd be her call to give. The way clapping at the dead man had been her call. The way it was going to have to be from here on, if any of us were going to make it. Because no one person could see the whole floor anymore. Not the building and the people both. Not the same pair of eyes. Julie looked at the radio, and then at me, and something moved across her face that I hadn't seen in a lot of years. Not softness, exactly. Not the marriage coming back. Nothing that simple. Just a kind of settling. The look of somebody being handed a thing they'd stopped expecting to be handed. She took the radio out of my hand. "Okay, Cald," she said, "Cald," which is what she'd called me for 20 years and hadn't called me in 4. And she clipped the radio to what was left of her waistband and turned to go sort her half of the group. And over her shoulder, dry, not looking back, she said, "You didn't finish the sentence. That's new." "Working on it," I said. And out past the yard wall, 4 blocks off and going nowhere, the tower stood up gray against the morning, with its smoke-stained lower floors and its dead hoist hanging on the side, holding up all those empty concrete rooms that were never going to be anybody's home. And I turned my back on it and went to help Julie load the truck.